Okay, the red light is on. We are live.
So what we do at the beginning is
Hello,
just vamp.
Vamp. Yes, I just learned an industry
Hello,
term. It's
world.
Vamp. Yes. We're so glad you're with us.
Yeah,
It
and so
is
when you
Shed
see them
here.
talking,
Yeah, yeah. Oh, right. Like this is like we're having a conversation. Are there actually words coming out of their mouth? Like when Jeopardy ends and they're still talking, are there actual words coming out of their mouth, Lisa?
there should be. Yeah, it's an actual
There should be.
conversation. They just pot it right down. So they turn down the audio and the people keep having a conversation. You just vamp. You see it when you're trying to get to break in a commercial or something live and they just start having a longer conversation, just vamp. And so they're just talking about talking. And so we're just talking to
Nice.
get excited about coming live and also waiting for more people to come in as we go. But this is so exciting.
Beautiful. So it is Stephen Shedletsky here. I'm so delighted to be with two dear friends, Lisa Bragg, who's also a fellow Torontonian, and Henna Pryor, who's a fellow good Awkwardonian.
That's what I'm going to call myself. Changing LinkedIn headline into. Okay.
Yes,
Here we go.
you're welcome. When you are live, please do join us. Hop into the chat and let us know that you're here. Let us know where you're joining us from. We want to make this very interactive. The whole sort of thought with this thing is Lisa, Henna, and I were hanging out. I think it was like in November or something of last year. And we said, hey, why don't we do this live and have this conversation? We each have books that have come out recently. Lisa's book, Bragging Rights, Henna's book, Good Awkward, and my book, Speak Up Culture. And there's some really nice nuances and connective tissue amongst them all. I mean, what does it take to brag? What does it take to stand out? What does it take to have a culture where good awkward is embraced? And what does it mean to have a speak up culture? They're sort of all connected. So we thought we would come on, we would talk about the nuances, the intersection of our work, and we're also going to do some fun giveaways. So if you hop into the chat, let us know where you're from, and that is on LinkedIn, on Facebook, or on YouTube. We will randomly select winners to receive a copy of one of our books. Henna, Lisa, anything that I missed in the opening spiel here or to help set us up?
Great housekeeping. We're excited to be here. I'm speaking on behalf of all of us. So no, that was great housekeeping. Thank you.
Yeah, my only addition is your chat addition does not need to be highly intellectual or interesting. Even a hello is fine. And again, our goal is we're going to talk to each other, but we'd also, love to talk to anyone who is happening to catch us on their coffee or lunch break and see what comes out of it. So
and excited from Rachel is from sunny San Francisco. We were just saying we're in cloudy conditions today. I'm in Toronto, and Shed, your part of Toronto is probably the exact same because we're not that far apart. It's gloomy and a little bit of rain today. So spring flowers, I don't know, but that's where we are right now. And Henna, where are you?
I'm south of Philly. I'm in the very southeastern corner of Pennsylvania, where it too is gloomy and gray. And Shed said we all have our, Zoom ready shirts on, but I'm 100% in slippers and camo leggings. Everyone, big ups to virtual culture. I'm so glad we're still occasionally doing that. So.
Yes, nice shirts and everything below is optional. So please do continue to hop into the chat. Rachel, so glad you're with us. Let us know where you're joining us from. Typos are accepted. You can just bang on your keyboard, press enter. Love that you're here with us. So Henna and Lisa, I have an opening question for the two of you, and then let's see where this conversation goes, and love to take questions and comments from those that are joining us on the webs as well. So the word culture is in the title of my book, and yet I know though culture isn't in your main titles, culture is still a big part of what you've both focused on and do focus on both in your work, and to even have good awkwards and bragging rights be possible. So can you sort of give everyone here, an introduction to your work and your books, and then how what culture work you do, or how you feel culture is embodied in the work that you both do? Henna, I'll throw it to you first.
Awesome. Yeah, it's not a book that has culture in the subtitle, but this is the underpinning of everything, right? I think I'll name the challenge that exists outside of most people's thinking when it comes to awkwardness and culture. So the thesis of the book is awkwardness is not a deficiency to fix. It's not a weakness to correct. actually leaning into it, embracing it is our greatest asset for personal and professional growth. Now, from a cultural standpoint, one of the biggest things I see is this idea that companies increasingly and by the day will say things like, I want our people to collaborate. I want them to get out of their silos. I want them to innovate. I want them to take risks. They say all these things regularly and constantly. And yet the message that they're actually giving their people is, but make sure you fit into our corporate culture. Right? Make sure you follow our standards of the way we do things as an organization. These are the things that make us successful as a company. This is why we are who we are as an organization. And what they don't realize is these are mixed messages, right? These are extremely mixed messages. And when you think about being willing to stumble, fumble, fall, make mistakes, be awkward on purpose, tolerate awkwardness by accident, these are sister sides of the same coin, right? This courageous conversations, speak up conversations, bragging about ourselves. None of these things happen perfectly. The last time I checked, no one came out of the womb with those skills, right? Typically there was a bit of fumbling through figuring out how to do that in a way that felt in integrity. But when people are constantly receiving messages about our culture does it like this, I think it really shuts down any promise of those types of conversations. So that would be my cultural take.
Love that. I'm just
so
gonna
many layers.
A couple comments. And Lisa, I'd love to hear same question for you. So one, Henna, I saw some research shared by everyone's favorite social scientist, Adam Grant, around, I think it's in his book, Give and Take, around those who actually present perfectly without ahs and ums develop less credibility and less trust with those presenters who actually have awkward pauses, ahs and ums, and are real and authentic. And so I think in so many of our, executive presence and presentation skills courses where we penalize people for ahs and ums and those filler words, but there's actually research. And I think the very thesis of your book points counter to that.
Yeah, I'll just add one other new piece of research on top of that before we jump to Lisa. I was at South by Southwest recently, and one of the keynote speakers, my friend Rohit Bhargava, made an observation about trust in the current climate that we live in and AI. Now, there's all this discussion about deep fakes and are videos even real? And we're all so worried. And someone came out and said, actually, I'm not worried at all. You know why? Because no one trusts anything anymore. No one trusts anything anymore, which was equally depressing and shocking, and also didn't feel like a reach, right? And the reason I bring this up now is, in a way, the more perfect you are, the less we believe you. It's the same reason a book with only 5-star reviews, hundreds of them, were like, bot. There's no way a book has only hundreds of 5-star reviews. So that imperfection, I'm not saying, make it artificial. I'm not saying create it, but it's more necessary than ever.
Love that. Yeah, I think
so many great points in that. Yeah, I'm just going to jump in, Shed. Say hello to Catherine from Westchester too. Thanks for joining us, and also remind people to put your hellos in so that you can win a book from us. But I want to jump off to that, and I'm making a note that I am supposed to talk about culture, but perfectionism
you don't have to, Lisa. You don't have to.
Because I'm a perfectionist, so I'll have to. And that's where so many of us come with so much baggage. And so when we say, oh, just don't be perfect, that's really loaded, and it's also nuanced in culture too, where we're taught, so many of us, you have to be perfect. You have to be that and a bag of chips. No, you're not just 100%. You have to be the whole sports. I gave 115%. Well, the mediocre person is only giving 70%. And so we have to start allowing ourselves and allowing each other to not always show up with, that I knew what I'm supposed to do today and have every single question ready to go. So we have to model that as leaders, that we're not perfect. And I get into that too, of that perfection trap that so many of us have. And so it's going to take a long time for us to let go of that, because we're taught, hey, I want those gold stars. What do you mean you only got 95%? Anyone else here on the call? 95%. Well, where's the other 5%? How come I didn't get it? That was all part of my identity, is to get those high grades and then wonder where those last little grades, last few marks didn't come from, and try to get more. So we have this culture of wanting perfectionism, but then saying that we shouldn't be perfect now. So I'm glad to see we're having a tide change, but it's going to take a lot of us a lot of reconditioning for that. So going back to culture, just to answer that quickly, culture's throughout my book. I did a quick little check on my ebook, and it's found on 25 pages because culturally we're taught, and again, it's reinforced through the organizations we work with, put your head down, do good work, and eventually someone will notice you. And I know you brought up Adam Grant, and we do love him in so many contexts, but one thing he says that really bothers me and actually gave me great fuel for my work, so I have to say thank you to Adam for it, is that he says bragging violates modesty norms. And if you're that good, your work would speak for itself. Thank you, my friend, because that's exactly. Thumbs down, because that's only good if you're close to power. And so many of us aren't close to power, or we're making these transitions where we're going from corporate to entrepreneurship to NGO to whatever it is that we're working in now. So things are changing and it's so malleable. So you can't wait to be close to power and for people to see how awesome you are. They're too busy putting out that next fire or trying to earn trust themselves to worry about your career. The only one that cares about your career the way you do is you. And that's it.
Yeah. One of the things that I deeply believe in and talk about as well as part of what a speak up culture is allyship, that and there's the whole, hashtag hype woman movement that I love as well around. I think part of a speak up culture is not being the only voice, it's raising the voices of others as well. So of course, in the end, you are the only person who owns your own career. I do want to be part of society and part of organizations where we actually hype one another up and don't take credit. We take responsibility and accountability, but dish out credit when it is due, to help build others up is a big thing that I believe in. Just, Lisa, I'm curious for your thoughts on that. Around what you just said. Yeah.
No, 100%. And that's where there's a whole chapter dedicated to leadership, but all the way infused. This isn't a me book at all. It's really, here's how I'm here to serve and then shine a spotlight on others. And I don't really believe that success should be a spotlight thing. We should have it out in the open more, and more of us showing our work along the way so that we can leave not breadcrumbs, markers, moments along the way, so other people can see it, that it's not just luck or some sort of back parlor activities that are going on. That sounds very old school, but something, how did you
now we're talking
there?
About prohibition. Yeah, no.
It's just luck. Like, how did you get lucky? And so what did you set up to do to get luck? And so that's where I think all three of us have that synergy. And I think we see it in all our posts, how much we're excited to celebrate others. And that I think comes through in all of our work. It's not just about the solo person. It's really how we're meant to serve in this world, and then how we are there to make sure that rising tides truly do lift all boats, and not just in the good times that we've had, but on those times where things aren't as good. Avani, I know you're friends with Henna, so I wanted to say hey, and glad you're here too. So
yeah, love it. Yeah, please do hop into the comments. Like we said, again, those who hop in and let us know that they're here, you will be entered into a draw to win a copy of our book, each of our books. So please do hop in, say hello. Henna, do you have something you want to throw in?
I figure this is the easiest way, right? Visual cue. I actually have a question for the both of you. So I love everything you've both shared, and it's 2024. We're beginning of Q2. I don't know how that happened, but here we are. And I'm curious, based on what you've both shared about some of these things we need in our culture, given that, yes, there's a push for return to office. Yes, we're starting to see some of this shift, but given that we are sort of potentially indefinitely in some hybrid structure and format, I'm curious to hear from both of you how these new styles of working, these new structures, are hurting or helping both of your initiatives to speak up more, to brag or help others brag more. How are you seeing the technology era affecting this?
Shed, do you want to go first?
I'm happy to, or if you have something off the top of your head, go.
We're such Canadians. And
I was going to say, this is so Canadian. I mean,
pass the mic.
This is called a Canadian standoff.
Yeah, we pass the mic and we pass the mic. I'm going to go first. Okay. Great. I'm going to say it. We pass the mic too much. So many of us. Great question. There's so many, the challenge is there is still that proximity bias, and people say, oh no, there isn't. And yes, there is. How often do you get an opportunity because you ran into somebody at the elevator or on an airplane. Yes, I talk to people who sit beside me on the airplane, and I get opportunities because of it. And so it happens to all of us, where you just run into people and you get an opportunity. And so I think that's a challenge for people who are always remote. I think when you're always remote, you do have to make sure that you put the effort in to show up in different ways, to come on a Zoom call or whatever it is that you're using earlier, to make sure that you're in your leader's calendar more often, and that you're showing up in whatever mediums you want to be, social media or your company newsletter. There's lots of ways of doing it, but you do have to show that you're present. It's much easier to let go of people who aren't right there in front of you. You don't have to know their stories about their families, or you don't have to see them cry as they walk out. You know, one organization in Canada just let go of people by groups. It was a media company. They had everyone join in on a Zoom call, and they all were terminated. Positions were all terminated in that call. And so we're losing, when you see somebody, you're right in proximity, you have to be more human, I think. And so we have to be more human with it. So I just challenge, when you are remote, to make sure that you show up in many different ways, and consider that, and consider how you do get in front of your leads more frequently, and your clients. And that's something I consider. Geography is a big thing. And so I also call out in the book, if you are working remotely, call on other people in different places in the world. We can connect. So there's more opportunities that way too. So it goes both ways of, yes, there's opportunities, and yes, that you can lose opportunities. So there's lots of angles to it, but you have to be seen and be heard.
Yeah, before we jump to Shed, I'll just add that I don't think this is new. I think it's been very easy for all of us to dehumanize folks when we don't have the live interaction. I was in staffing and executive search for 14 years, and I think it was very easy for people to go, oh, another recruiter, oh, delete, 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 until I had a even short conversation. And then all of a sudden it was, oh, she's not just like selling, she's actually a real person. Oh my gosh, she's a real person. And all of a sudden I was not othered anymore.
Yeah.
But increasingly, it is so easy to other and dehumanize when we're not having that conversation in real life.
Yeah. And I'm just going to add to that before, it's just really that when we can see, and that's where people, when you're listening to the radio or you're watching your favorite TV shows, we feel like we know those people. And it's because we see them over and over and over again. And so that's part of that bias. When we see somebody over and over again, we get to feel like we know them. And so I think that's part of the challenge. Shed, over to you.
Oh, how much time do I have? I could go on for a few. Okay. So, I mean, one comment is, I do think, I mean, it's called abstraction. Like we live in this world where it is so easy for us to be inhumane, even though we are human, and technology and social media only amplifies that. I think, Henna, to your question of how does, whether we're working in person, a mix, or completely remote, how does that affect culture? I think there are pros and there are cons. You know, one, I'm a big believer that the nature of the work should dictate where the work takes place. So there are some jobs that they should take place in person. If you're leading people where they have to do jobs in person, I think that leader should be in person as well. There are benefits, though, to technology, and I think we need to use technology for its power and not it use us. So some examples of this. When it comes to creating a speak up culture, use of chat, use of polls, Mentimeters, all these things, you can actually generate more voice and more feedback, and sometimes do it in ways that are better than doing it in person, utilizing technology to get a pulse and a sense, and then using that data to help guide conversations, decisions, work that should or ought to be done. There was also something really interesting that I observed when everyone went from working from home at the beginning of the pandemic, is you set up a home office. Some people didn't have one. You know, I saw, you know, both my wife and I were working from home. I saw my wife was on calls, and there were people that she was working with that they were taking calls from like their furnace room, because that was the only place that they could take, like in their basement with their like recreational stuff hanging from the wall. But I think something that's really interesting is, for the first time ever, we actually got to see people's cats and pets. We got to see trinkets and things that are of meaning to them, the piece of art behind them, a little Star Wars trinket or toy. So there's actually some really interesting stuff that when you connect with folks using video, or even asking really good questions like, what do you need to say to be present right now, and you could talk about something personal that's going on that's impacting you, but just to say it in an appropriate way to be here. So I actually think there are ways that we can intentionally design remote and hybrid work to create a thriving, great speak up culture. I'm all for developing relationship in person, but I think there's a really neat way where we can have multiple wins with flexibility from working from home all the time or some of the time, how it opens up those who can enter into the workforce geographically or what's going on in their lives. So I think there are pros and cons.
Can I ask a follow-up
absolutely
question?
agree.
Oh,
go ahead. Well, I just wanted to add in, like, we just need to be aware of the opportunities it does bring. And I think the end of the point is you have to show up in whatever medium that you're going to choose, because my work, it's not all about being an extrovert and being the loudest person in the room. It's really about being the signal. How do you signal to the people that matter? And it doesn't have to be broadcasting to the world of, like Oprah's Midas touch kind of thing to everyone in the world. It could really just be to an audience of one, but you have to continually show up to that audience of one. And it's the beautiful thing is that we can be in Toronto and we're doing this awesome thing with somebody who's in south of Philly, and we're talking to people in San Francisco and near Philly, and we're talking to Marlene, who's probably in Florida, but she lives in Lindsay, Ontario. So like we're talking to these people all over the world, and but I think that what it comes down to, and what we've said again and again, is we're humans having a human experience, and we need to show up even more so as humans nowadays. And I think that's one of the underlying points to all of this too.
Awesome. I had a follow-up question on this. So for those that are with us live, we didn't premeditate this. This is literally me just following a curiosity here, pulling threads from these two brilliant people. And again, if you're just joining, please say hello in the chat and tell us where you are. There are some giveaways for people who tell us hello. We won't know you're here unless you say hello. So please do. I wanted to just ask, and again, this is not a leading question. I'm genuinely curious each of your answer on this. Do you think that the technologies are helping people professionally in lower positions of power speak up or share their wins? Is it leveling the playing field in any meaningful way?
I would say it has the potential to. I mean, it's a someone speaking up. Heyo. I think it can be either weaponized or it can actually provide greater opportunity. So I don't think there's one answer, Henna. I think so technology is good at a few things. It's good at speed of transaction. It's good at access of information, whether that access is right or not, or whether that information is right or not, back to deep fakes and authenticity and trust. And it can form a connection. Technology isn't as good at building relationship as is in person, but we can have a conversation with someone who's in New Zealand right now. That's pretty cool, right? So I think those are some of the advantages and some of the challenges with technology. So I think it can create more access. It can also create abuse of power. But that's my thought. Lisa, I'm curious for you, and Henna, your thoughts on your own question as well.
Sure. Yeah. So when I was conducting research for Bragging Rights, I didn't want it just to be an N1, a story of a white Canadian woman in downtown Toronto. I wanted to really make sure that it was a broader scope. And so talk to people in Canada, in the US, and in Europe and UK, Australia, India, new Canadian from China, a panel from Japan to really understand what is it and why are we like the way we are? Is it just me? And it wasn't. And so I found that fascinating. But so this international research I did, it really distilled down some interesting information to say there is a socioeconomic barrier to people willing to brag and talk about their successes. And it's because so many of us are taught to play within the rules, and you don't want to ever step above your ladder. And this is all thinking from the factory era and before that, and we're well beyond the factory era, but it's still ingrained in us to make sure that we're hidden gems, or don't put your head above because you don't want it, or it's tall poppy, all those things that still play into us. But socioeconomic was a big thing because you don't want to play outside the lines, because you don't want to get in trouble with the law. You don't want to lose your job. You don't have that social clout to do whatever you want. So we're seeing now more and more people who are billionaires who are taking the reins of social media and really amplifying their voices. So we're going way back to, I think it was the yellow journalism, yellow papers, when not yellow pages, yellow papers, when really a company owned the news in the area. And they would tell people what they wanted to hear. So a lot of propaganda. We're starting to see that even more so again, as more and more billionaires take over the airwaves. And so we're moving from a weird time. We're in a weird time again. We're always in a weird time now in this future that we live in, but where power is becoming so concentrated. And so I think it's getting harder for voices that have been marginalized to be heard and seen without rallying more people. And it's very select, where before, we see people like Scott Stratton, who, amassed a huge following on Twitter just by slowly snowballing. I think that's harder to do nowadays because people are now bringing their following with them wherever they go. And celebrity culture is really strong. And so it's harder for people to be seen and be heard. But that's why, again, we don't need to be seen and heard by everyone. We just need to keep building our audiences one person at a time to have quality over quantity, which is hard for some people to hear because they want 1 million followers to do whatever they want them to do. But that's a lot. I know that, Henna, you have definitely some thoughts on this. Randy, glad to see you're here. Thank you for coming.
No, I love what you both said. I think, what's interesting about all three of our work is that there's many themes that overlap, but two of the big ones are social approval. We are all social creatures who do typically work in teams. Some of us might work with astronauts or polar explorers who work completely in isolation, but for the most part, no, right? So social approval is running through everyone's brain. We're conditioned to be communal creatures, so that's always there. And then, of course, psychological safety. I think we have to be careful not to paint with a broad brush. Everyone should do this. They ought to do that. It depends, right? It depends. And so I think my general opinion, which may have shifted, I think, based on hearing both of you, but general opinion is, I think, what I kind of heard Shed say, which is, I do think it helps give some people a voice that may be harder to access in a live setting. But I also think it has a very deep danger of becoming a crutch. And there's increasing data that actually, I just read a study that came out of, it was done on the UK, but it was done by Vivek Murthy of the US about, the loneliness and all this. But the study essentially said that teenagers in the UK can no longer communicate offline very well, essentially was the through line. They've become so reliant on online communication that they've literally started to lose the ability to communicate offline. And, of course, to me, that speaks so much to what I get excited about, social fitness and whatever. But I think about, gosh, if they can't do that, this is our next generation of young workers. How are they going to speak up at work? How are they going to share their wins or help somebody else do it? They can't even talk to each other. Like, it's terrifying. So yes and no is what I'm thinking.
There's going to be a whole lot of awkward. It just may not be good.
No, it's going to be bad, awkward, gross, awkward, all the above. None of it good.
But so a couple of things are going through my head here. So one is, we live in the swipe right generation. I did online dating, but it was actually not swiping right.
I was going to say, how do you know which way? I
was like browser version when there was no swiping. So that's one piece is, I think it's an important skill of going up to a stranger and talking to them and introducing yourself. It's an important skill. So how do we teach people to do that? Because it is a skill. There are attributes that can make it easier for some of us, but it's a skill that can be taught and learned. The other thing, and Lisa, I know you're familiar with Sean Kanungo's work. Is that right?
I don't know.
Sean Kanungo, Bold Ones.
No.
So Sean's a friend out of Edmonton. He does some really interesting work all around innovation. He has a book out called Bold Ones. And he's done some interesting work on studying trends with celebrities. So when we were growing up, and even sort of the past 5 or 10 years, there are celebrities that like everyone knows. Taylor Swift's, Brad Pitt's, Jennifer Aniston, like everyone knows those. But there's something interesting happening with all the proliferation of different social media platforms, is celebrity is becoming far more niche, which is really interesting. So Sean does this exercise where he asks audiences to think of a new actor or actress who has become popular in the last 5 years that everyone knows. And like every single person that you name, it's more than 5 years ago. And it's like, and like, I do a little bit of a litmus test, and I look on my, my TV guide, which is just when you push the guide, the guide button on your TV now. And I will do this social experiment where I'll look at who's the host and the musical guest on Saturday Night Live. And most times I have no idea who they are. And either my age is showing, or there's actually a little bit of a different trend where I think there is sort of a fragmentation of celebrity. I think that can potentially be good from a dispersion of power. Maybe not. Again, pros and cons to everything.
Interesting.
Just a couple things that I'm noticing.
I'm just going to add to that, because when you look at books, so sorry about that. I think I have a bit of a lag, but as authors, do you ever go on Amazon to see who's the bestseller right now? And you're like, how could it still be Atomic Habits?
I never do
Good
that,
on him.
Lisa.
Never. But you'll see, it's like, how is it still lean in for Sheryl Sandberg in my category, or how, Love the Confidence Code, and it's still up there. And these are older titles now. And so you see a lot of 5, 10, 15, 4 years titles still really winning in the different categories. And so it takes a long time for a title to get some staying ground. And I think a lot of it is because so much of it is that we are sharing with here's what I recommend to other people. So we have that kind of culture. And then what keeps in the area stays in the area. The plate that's spinning stays spinning. So unless you get your plate spinning that people know about you, unless you're the celebrity that's continually on those shows, people don't know about you. And it takes that time to get up there. And then it takes time to stay up there. So that's similar to our world as authors, this new world. All of us, this is your first book, everyone else, right? This is my first book. Yeah. So it takes the time of getting known for your work and then staying up there and not being dropped. I know people that have already dropped their books that released them in September, and they're no longer out there giving their book love and lift. So I think that's a bit of a challenge in the world that we live in.
Very neat. We're going to begin to land this plane here. So if you have any specific comments or questions for us about this conversation, please do hop into the chat and let us know. Great to see that we have Bridget, Randy, Marlene, Avani, Catherine, Rachel. Love it. Ale, of course, from my team is here, but please do hop into the chat. Let us know if you have a question as well. Awesome.
I have one, Shed. Can I
go?
Yes. Honestly, you guys, you know what? I signed up for this because I just wanted to pick Shed and Lisa's brains. This is just honestly, you guys are just watching me learn from them. That's why we're here. No, my question is this, because again, this is something I thought about a lot for my book, which is conditioning and the way that we all grew up and the messages that we got. And so without going too deeply into this, I grew up in a culture that was very much dominated by expressions like "log kya kenge," which means what will other people think? But what will the community say? What will other people think? That was like drilled into my head. And so part of the hardest work that I've had to do, I would say the hardest work I've had to do, is undoing some old conditioning. So again, knowing how difficult it can be for some to speak up, knowing how difficult it can be to share your wins or do that on behalf of others. I'm curious, what did you both learn about maybe just techniques or ways to A, tune into that conditioning, and B, begin to override it, if we were to give people like one or two tactical things?
Love that question. Lisa, I'm happy to
I
go
want to go
first this
ladies,
time.
ladies first.
Ladies
Okay.
first. That's
Well,
the right one.
what will they say? What will they say? I had a person I interviewed in the book, Piela. She's from Mumbai. That whole thing. What will these aunties say? The aunties and uncles. Well, who are they? The anonymous they. And it repeats in lots of cultures too, the anonymous they. And it's really hard for us to get rid of all that social conditioning because we're taught it very young of what will they think. And so we start to think all the way through, well, what will they think? Also, we're given these rubrics of success when we're young that so many of us adhere to now, of like, here's what you do to get an A or, 10 out of 10. And so we lose that as we enter the world of work. And so we definitely, when we're young too, we want to fit in so desperately. So we don't want to do anything that makes us stand out. So it's getting over the conditioning and realizing, well, I need to put myself out there so that people know how I'm of service to the world. So my book has lots of tips and techniques throughout. It has a to consider, to share, and a to do, because I wanted to make it simple. So the to do is something easy. Consider, we don't do enough self-reflection. So if I'm going to say anything right now, it's to have some self-reflection. So when we've been saying these things like, what will people say? Or the cream rises to the top, or wait your turn. A lot of the myths that have come along with you, or be that hidden gem. Why do you have that? So do that self-reflection piece. So take some time and think about, well, why do I feel that way? Because self-reflection is the number one thing that we don't do and we say we do. And then I would also say, start to brag to yourself first. When you do something that you see is a win, start your brag book, your smile file, your kudos report, your whatever you want to call it. There's lots of names for it. Nice file. Start it for yourself and start it today. And so whenever you get a compliment from anywhere else, like all the lovely compliments we've been getting here, keep those. So when you do the job doesn't work out, you didn't do a great job, you can go back to it and say, yes, I'm still on the right mission. And also to give yourself that pat on the back, because not everyone's watching to give you a compliment. We're not looking for always external validation. That gets dangerous. It's about self-validation. What do I feel that I did a tremendous job? And everyone give yourself a pat on the back right now, just for being, doing whatever it is. Yes, the two-handed, because we need to compliment ourselves, give ourselves credit, and own our successes first internally, and then share them externally. So start that brag book today with whatever it is that you've done that really felt good to you.
I love it.
Love that brag book. What I would say to this, Henna, it's a brilliant question. So the good news about one's conditioning is it isn't your destiny. And one of the things that we really dove into, because I'll often get this question of like, how do you have a speak up culture when you have folks who come from a background, whether culturally or in their family or whatever it might be, where they don't speak up? You were taught to be seen, not heard. We often get this in many Asian cultures, right? And a good study of this is the Korean Airlines cockpit, where they were speaking in the Korean language, which has hierarchical language deeply embedded within it. And so there were issues where more junior pilots weren't speaking up to the more senior captain that there's an issue. Like, I see ice on the wing, right? At most, they would only slightly suggest. Now that level of hierarchy is fine for your father-in-law. When you have a job that success or failure, and sometimes loss of life or loss of high stakes matters, we need to change that. The good news is, again, our conditioning, or the backpacks that we might bring into a team or a culture, isn't our destiny, and we can change it. And actually, this is the reason I like to use pickle brine as an analogy for culture, because you can take a world-class cucumber, put it in some awful brine, and it becomes an awful pickle. No fault to the cucumber. You must examine the brine that it's in. The good news about human beings, different than pickles, or anything that ferments. I'm talking carrots. We can go down all the list here.
Hungry.
But it's lunchtime. The good news about human beings is we can re-ferment. So you can take someone who's coming from a particular cultural background, or had an awful boss, or is coming from an unhealthy culture, but put them inside of a healthy brine, and they can re-ferment. You can actually provide them with new updated software for their conditioning, if you will. So that's the power of culture and brine, is it can actually change people's behaviors and ethics for the better or for the worse.
So you're telling me I'm not supposed to re-ferment my pickles? I've been doing it wrong?
You can attempt. I'm not a pickle specialist.
I don't even like pickles.
I'm just a pickle specialist when it comes to use them for analogies for culture.
No. But what I took from both of you, though, I think it's funny. You both had like a similar lesson that I'm just going to try to rephrase in my own words, which is find a worthy goal big enough to be willing to override the stories that you've told yourself.
Oh, nice.
Right? In the case of the Korean Airlines, it's loss of life. That's a goal worth avoiding, right? Just something that's bigger than that. In the case of Lisa's stuff, it's, understand the need for what this is as it relates to your career, as it relates to your life. Make that a goal big enough that you can toss the other stuff to one side. If not permanently, then at least in that moment.
And I think that's also part of what great leaders do is they give us that purpose, they give us that why, they give us something that it is worth taking a risk for, which could be our teammates, which could be our strengths, which could be our success or our fulfillment, or something bigger like preventing people from dying in the case of
No, I'm glad you both said that, though. I think even in my work and in my book, people are like, oh, do we just embrace our awkward all the time? Like, do we just throw ourselves into every awkward situation? No, it has to be directional, right? I don't think Lisa's suggesting that we just brag on every single little minutia of the day. I don't think Shed's suggesting we speak up on every moment, on everything. It's got to be directional towards something that matters enough. And that's unique. That's unique to you. That's why I think in the leadership and professional development circle, I'll be honest, there was a period there where I'm like, values again? Like, I don't want to talk about values again. But then when you realize that if you actually can get clear on them and operationalize them, that's where all the magic happens.
Yeah.
That's where it gets spicy and fun, in my opinion.
I just want to welcome Amanda and Tim. Glad to see that you're both here and that you're enjoying our conversation. But just to add to that, I think it is you have to be intentional. We are not bragging about everything. And so bragging also means talking about one's success with pride, but pride also means justified self-love. And so that's the big part of it, is justified self-love. It's how we are of service. But you have to have intention. We're not going to go and talk about all of our wins. The three of us are parents here. We don't want to be that person that hears, oh, my child did all those markers and all those things well before, or as they go into high school, they're getting all the grades and all the leagues and all the things. Like, we don't want to hear all of those things. So you have to be really intentional about what is your goal? Why do you want to have this in front of that person? What is the point? So being intentional about so many things. It's exhausting to not be. It's too much work. I think there's too much work on all of it. So really being intentional about what it is that you want to tell the world about or that one person about your successes.
That's good.
The thing, Henna, as well, that you made me think of is, I don't think this is true for all cliches, but a cliche is a cliche because generally it's true.
Right.
You're like, values again. It's like, because they freaking matter.
Right.
Like, it's like when as a society are we going to outgrow values? I hope never. Right? Because values are really important, but it's to your point, if values are just things that we print on posters or put as our screensaver, but don't enact them or live them, it's pretty shallow. So we actually have to ingrain them in our behavior.
Yeah. Do you think, I'm making sure I'm careful of time, but I'm curious, just maybe a quick response for both of you. Do you think people hide behind humility too much? Humility
absolutely.
Matters. Humility is important. And do you think people hide behind, they use humility as a shield?
Absolutely.
I love how this has become Henna interviews Lisa. And Lisa, go on.
I'm the former too, everyone. Okay, sorry.
But absolutely. I think people have forgotten. Yes, we are here built on the shoulders of giants. Other people have paved the way. We know this to be true. But that's where I think now it's challenging. And I want to hear what Shed thinks, because we are so in this like servant leadership era, but we're getting mixed up about servant leadership means, because then we think, well, I shouldn't take anything. I should be on the sidelines, not serving my team, but serving other people, letting everyone have everything instead of me holding the mic, taking the mic, and properly passing the mic. And so I think there's a challenge to how we're interpreting some of this, but to know that, yes, we are here already built on the shoulders of giants, but we can't be hidden gems. So again, we need to be able to fit in to the cultures that we're part of. So you need to fit in as part of your team, but we also need to stand out, let people know why we are here to serve. And then we need to add in our own unique perspectives. And so when we keep saying, well, I have to pass it on to somebody else. And for a lot of people, they can't afford that. You know, it's wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think it's Henna Gadsby in my book, who's a brilliant comedian, who talks about it, that we so often go into self-deprecation and we start listing off the things that, you know, for humility's sake, that was wrong, that we didn't do well, to deflect any compliments and our successes. And that's a trap for so many people. So that's where I always caution about self-deprecation, especially showing that as leaders, because so many people don't do it well. So that's humility is one of those like bing, 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 bing words for me. And humble, like I get really worried about how people are using it in their culture.
Shed, spicy take.
I got things to say.
People. I know you have things to say about servant leadership. I'm like, what you got? What you got?
So a couple of things come up. First is a story. I was cut from my grade 8 basketball team because, I mean, I'm not a great basketball player. Just going to throw that out. I'm very okay. But for some reason, we were playing a 3-on-3 tournament in this tryout, and like I was on fire. I think I scored a career high 6 points in like 3 minutes. And then for some reason, I didn't want to hog the ball. So I kept passing, even though I had some open shots. And I was cut from the team because I passed too much. And now look at me. Anyway, that's just a story that comes to mind on like humility. And I actually got punished for trying to highlight other players. But anyway, okay, a couple things. So because I actually think humility is a strength. I think humility can derail when it becomes meekness. So I have things to say on servant leadership, and then I have things to say on humility and confidence. So servant leadership, the very fact that we have the term servant leadership means to me that our modern definition and practice of leadership is broken. Servant leadership to me is the same thing as saying human leadership. Like it's superfluous and synonymous. Like leaders serve, leaders are human beings. And so I think the fact that we're adding terms onto leadership means that we're just messing up and guffing up leadership. So I'm a fan of servant leadership as a concept, but I also just call it leadership, right? That's what it is.
Do you emphasize the L like that every time you say it?
Yes, for effect. The other thing is so there's confidence and then there's insecurity. And I think when confidence there's confidence and there's humility, and both of them can derail. So confidence derails into arrogance. Arrogance is actually a form of insecurity. It's just loud. And it's unfortunate because it's really freaking annoying. But I actually developed more empathy for arrogance because it's so cute. They're just insecure, but that's confidence derailing. Humility can derail into meekness or insecurity, playing small. But what's interesting is we cannot be both humble and arrogant at the same time, but we can be both humble and confident. Confident is a belief that we have value. We have worth. We are good. We're not great at everything. That's why we need each other. So I think we can both be confident and humble. I think when humility derails, it derails into playing smaller, being meek.
I think it's the standard. By the way, speaking of awkward, it just thundered, and so if you see my angle change, it's because the dog is not happy. Awkward confidence right here. Okay, no, what I hear in that is, I think that the sort of typical every strength in excess can become a weakness. Humility, I don't think one of us would argue humility is a bad thing. I think humility is something that frankly is welcome and needed in many circles. It's when we mistake humility for hiding or for shrinking, or we use it as I'm not doing this because I'm humble. Is that really what's happening? Or again, are you afraid to speak up? Are you afraid to share a success? That's where we have to be careful, I think.
Yeah. And I agree with all of that. I just think that so much of the messaging around this, it's being picked up by the wrong people. And that's where, again, we're humans having a human experience, that leadership that Shed gave us so well. We pick up, too many people are picking up on it though, that don't need it. And so it's the other people that need it more. And so many of us are the hidden gems. So watching when you get the messaging about servant leadership and not, it's a nuance for everyone. And so it's a challenge to make sure that, do you really need that message? I know it's coming up in the business periodicals, but is that a message for you, or is that a message for someone else? Because some of us are taking in too many of the messages, and then we continue to be hidden gems, and then we do more work, and then we burn out. Or we see it on our teams where they're, self-deprecating. They're not taking the credit. They're not asking for the promotion they already deserve. And so those are challenges when we keep getting some of the messages over and over again about having more humility in the workplace, where it's maybe just a few people over there and not necessarily the people on our team that need that message.
So I have a question for the both of you, just because Henna's been too good of an interviewer. And then we'll begin to land this plane here. I've actually noticed a couple themes I want to add on as well. So one is, I always get irked when folks label themselves as a leader. Like if I see someone's LinkedIn profile and they have titled themselves servant leader, I'm like, ooh, like careful. I'm curious. So Lisa, from your bragging rights point of view, I always try to impart to folks, behave into the role, and people will refer to you that way. Like I can label myself a father, but I can't say great father. That just lowers my credibility. So I'm curious, Lisa, especially from your bragging rights point of view, what to do when you are proud of wanting to be a leader, but can you label yourself a leader, or is that more strong when it's labeled by others?
Hey, it's so much easier when someone else says it. When someone else reads your bio and you're like, oh, yes, I did win all those awards. Oh, thank you for noticing. Well, I wrote it myself, right? So it's nicer when someone else gives it to us. But the challenge is, and research shows, that people don't want to call themselves a leader. They're afraid of it. And so I have this little magic wand right here that I will do a little spiel in my workshops and some of my things. And I don't know if it lights up anymore. Oh, it does. Look at that. Woohoo. We need a little bit of the bling bling. But where people don't believe that they are leaders or experts or visionaries, and they truly are. And so they need someone like, who am I to tell them that? But they need me to say that, yes, you are a leader. And then magical things happen when someone else tells you that you are those things, and when you start to really believe it. Now, I think what your question is also saying is, are you really the ninja guru master? Those kind of things that we see on social media. And those titles I'm not a big fan of, but I think calling yourself a leader, again, are you a great leader? That is, to your point, no, that is really not for you to decide, but you are a leader. You are an expert if you've actually made a body of work and collected information. You are a visionary if you can see trends ahead and are actually putting your own thinking out there that is maybe controversial or is brand new out there, because we're living in the future. So I think you can call yourselves those things. I think it just gets tricky when you start to add in any extra adjectives to making that I am super duper bestest in the whole wide world, whatever I am. That's when it's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, but I love that focus on the behavior. If you behave into it, then you are.
Yeah.
But I think especially if folks highlight it. Henna, anything to add on that?
Yeah, I think +1 on everything Lisa just said. I think the only other thing I'd add is it depends how you use. I'm a word nerd. I like language. I like studying language. I like the way people use language. And I think any word depends on how you use it. So if you're, one of these arrogant types that we talked about earlier, and you call yourself a leader, well, I'm the leader of this team, then that word sucks on that person. But if you're someone who's genuinely trying to affect positive change, you're trying to lead and not just manage, trying to lead and not just supervise, then that word might help you, again, lean into the behaviors. I talk about the way people use the word awkward a lot. People sometimes they use it in the way that it's actually defined, which is as an emotion, a transient state. But some people are, I am awkward. I am socially awkward. And factually, there's no such thing as an awkward person. So if you use that term in a humorous way, but you still go do the things. Sorry, this dog on my lap, man. The thunder keeps going and she's like shaking. If you use that word and you own it right? I'm so awkward, but I'm going to raise my hand and speak in the meeting anyway. I'm still going to present in front of the client. Then I don't care. Have at it. But if you're, oh, I can't possibly speak in front of the team. I'm so awkward. I can't do that. Well, that is now an identity box of your own creation. So it depends. And I think, you know, to the point that Lisa made and Shed that I think you started to kind of synthesize is if you're not sure if it's hurting you or helping you, ask other people, right? Like have a 360. Is that term helping you lean into your strengths and your best self, or is it preventing you and hurting you? Seek other opinions a little if it helps.
Love that. Love that. A couple of things that I've noticed in our conversation, and then we're gonna land this plane here as we near the top of the hour. We've used the word fit and culture fit. And I loved, Henna, how you said with Good Awkward that if we actually hire for fit, we can create just a bunch of carbon copies of the same person. Doesn't work so well. I've started to use the word culture add, because culture fit, you might hire just the same or look for the same or look for a form, and then we don't innovate or create change. So I've loved this notion, this term culture add, speaking of language. And yeah, for 2023, the word of the year was authenticity, because we don't have enough of it, genuine, real of it. So this is our ask, because you said if everyone just has 5-star reviews on their books, then it might be fake. So go out, give our book a 1-star rating, please. Help us.
Are we doing? How about 4? How about 4? What's wrong with 4?
4, please. I think we need the love. You know, we need more love. Yeah.
That was the takeaway from Henna is rate our book a 1 or 2, please, just so we know it's real. It's legit. Any closing words from the two of you, salient points or things that you're left with, or a question or an idea, just as we wrap up here?
My one thought is this. I think I learned so much from both of you today. So thank you. And also just a reminder that none of this, as Lisa had said earlier, is one size fits all. Some of us could stand to speak up more. Some of us could stand to sit down and speak up less, right? Some of us could stand to share our wins more. Some of us could stand to do it a lot less, give other people room. Some of us embrace our awkwardness well, and others, frankly, you know, have a different edge to sharpen. It's not that, right? There's nuance and personalization and discernment that needs to go into all of it. So anything that we've shared, take what's valuable to you and leave what's not, because there is no sweeping brush that's going to work for all of us.
Beautiful. I think you've said that before. That gave me shivers. That should be in your bit for when you give speeches.
Which part? I don't even know what I just said.
Go back and listen to it. Thankfully, it's being taped. So I would add, you know what, Henna, when you came out with your TEDx talk on bragging, like I was like totally freaked out because I didn't know you then.
No.
And I took in and I saw it and I'm like, good. And then I realized good is confession time. Good. Now I need to know her because she's talking my language. And so I need to know her. It's not a competition thing about who can be out there rallying for bragging more. It's about, hey, now there's somebody that I can collaborate with. And so that's a message I want to leave with everyone is think about how you can collaborate with people over competition. I think a lot of other authors would be saying, why are you having this session with other people who are also trying to be out there selling books, selling speaking time, selling workshops, whatever else awesomeness that you two bring to the world? Why would you do that? You know, people only have so much money to buy a book. They almost have so little time to read books in our group, but prescriptive nonfiction. But the reality is, when you think of collaboration over competition, so many good things can happen. And so think about collaboration over competition in your workplace. And it's not a Pollyanna-esque term. It's really, how do you think about it in a different way so then that you can make more awesome things happen with people who are your peers or above you and that you are already in awe of. And so that's really, I'm so thankful to be in this opportunity with the two of you. But I wanted to start with a confession with Henna's like, oh my goodness, like what is that? Oh no. And then so happy that I reached out, and now the joy that like watching your successes and that we're doing these things together, and with the awesomeness of Shed. I think I said awesome maybe 25 times in that comment.
I love it.
Back
more.
More awesome.
I'm glad you did, Lisa.
Well, I'll close by saying I love that what you just shared, both of you and Henna, on this context. Like, context is so important. So I'm going to steal from you, Henna, and say that there's good awkward and there's bad awkward. You know, and I like to talk about a lot about vulnerability, and vulnerability doesn't mean sharing all things all the time with all people. That can be oversharing and not suitable for work. Vulnerability and all of this is about context, which none of us are experts on all the time. It's why we need each other for feedback of like, yes, more of that, not as much of that. So we're so grateful that you all joined us here today. Like we said, we're going to be giving away copies of our book, so you will hear from us in a direct message on that. Henna, Lisa, thank you so much for doing this with us. Thank you for Ale in the backgrounds on the ones and twos. Henna, Lisa, any final word from the two of you?
Link up with all of us.
Go and buy their books. That's what I'm going to say. We never do the ask. Go buy these books because they are books that are not just life-changing for your own practice and your own leadership, but it's also going to make a difference as you are a leader and helping your teams to survive and thrive in this world. It'll make you more human. That's what I'm going to say, because that was one of our other words, is humans helping humans. So go buy their books. They're so good and they are doing such great things. So I appreciate that. I appreciate your time.
And likewise for Lisa's book, Bragging Rights, giddy up. Thank you all. I hope we see some sunshine soon. Like we had some sunshine here in San Francisco. We don't have sunshine in Toronto or Philly yet. So hopefully that happens. For the sake of Henna's dog, please.
God, she's terrible. It's terrible.
Please
stop the suffering.
For our vitamin D.
Thanks all.
Thank
all.
you.
We'll see you soon.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.